Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Kevin Grady, patron of the Thoresby Society. This is our third lunchtime lecture of this series. Now, Robert's putting his hand in his pocket, you see, so he's disturbing the microphone. I have to keep him on his best behaviour, but it's delightful to have the four lunchtime November lectures on all sorts of different aspects of Leeds. And this week we have Robert Dyson, whose family roots, go quite a way back in our city. And I've known Robert for a long time. He was a lawyer in the city, and then in retirement, he sort of spent his time researching all sorts of different aspects of the history of the city. And the aspect which has seemed to have captured his imagination most is Kergate, almost, or one of the very oldest streets in our, sorry, Kergate, Mabgate. Yes, you see, Kergate is the oldest street in Leeds, but Mabgate is very close. And Robert's got involved in projects to do with the regeneration of Mabgate. And so I've seen his PowerPoint presentation already. In the process of preparing it, he said he wished he'd never met me because it is very fiddly to produce PowerPoints, particularly in the way Robert has done, particularly when you try and highlight things on screens. I've got a wobbly hand too, Robert. So, but anyway, I'm really looking forward to see what Robert has to say about Mabgate, past, present, and future. So, thank you, Robert.
Thank you. Very kind introduction. And it was nearly got the right subject. Right. A few years ago, I barely knew the existence of Mabgate, and now it's very much part of my life. Maybe it will be part of yours as well after today. Developers have only recently woken up to the fact that Mabgate is really very close to the city centre and very marketable for all sorts of uses, including particularly apartments. Let's establish where Mabgate is. It's the green land. You've got Regent Street on the left, which is the west. That's blue. You've got Skinner Lane, which is coming on which is on the north, which is red, and then you've got York Road at the bottom, which is yellow. The eastern side is a little bit dodgy because nobody quite knows where it ends and begins. So that's what we're talking about, and you can see it in relation to where Quarry Hill Flats used to be there. It's right next to it, and it's right next to the York Road, which you'll see is a very ancient highway. This talk is going to try to paint a picture of Mabgate from 1066 through to today. And I will also look forward to what lies ahead for Mabgate in years to come. It's worth pointing out that very confusingly, Mabgate is not only an area, but it's also the name of the principal street of the area. And the actual street goes along that line in north-south in the middle there. Now here we have a picture of I got it from Kevin's book, and I'm sure Kevin got it from somewhere else, but it's a very useful plan of what Leeds looked like around about the time of William the Conqueror. And again, we've got the red is the York Road, blue at the bottom is the River Aire, and the green is Kergate. So you've got a rough idea of where Mabgate is because we've got a letter M in the middle there. I thought I'd make it straightforward for you. So that's where we are. And Mabgate was part of what you can see on the right there. Oops. On the right there, it says waste, because a typical manorial village would have common fields where crops would be grown, and that would be there. That was one of them. And there would also be typically a waste which was a part of rough land which was available for the villagers to use to gain access to wood for their fires, and they could allow their, if they had any animals, they could graze there and so forth. And although it's called waste, in the words of Professor Joyce Hill, who many of you will know, she says it's waste. It's not wasted. So it's had a use. The village of Leeds was a small one, but thanks to a series of asset stripping gifts made by the lords of the manor over a period of many years, as an economic, by 1207, as an economic manorial village, it was a disaster. I'm talking about Leeds, not Mabgate at the moment. So in 1207, the lord of the manor, for the time being, decided to try to revitalise what was left of the Leeds manor and make it profitable. And this he did, and this did to some extent impact on Mabgate. Again, well, what he did was he withdrew from one part of the common fields. He withdrew from. He withdrew from that common field there. He withdrew this purple land here, which is the Brigate of today. So that was withdrawn, and so he withdrew that, and he charged a rent of 16 pence per annum to tenants who were to occupy these lots or plots on each. There were 30 plots on each side of Brigate, and he was basically the idea was that people would live there, they would have workshops there, they would not be farmers, but they would serve farmers and serve and create an industry. And in fact, that was probably the beginning of Leeds as a major city 700 years later. In addition to giving them this land, he also gave them half an acre of land out of the waste to basically to be able to grow crops on them there or to graze animals. And this is, of course, cheap agile with Mabgate of today. So that's the first reference we really have of Mabgate as being of any significance in its history. Why is it called Mabgate? The truth is that nobody really knows, but there are a number of theories. And if this talk had been given in 1715, it would have been given by Ralph Thoresby himself, who's our benefactor. And he came up with this idea that I can't begin to pronounce all these things, but he said it started off as Mabate. He said it was there was a Latin connection. Then as time goes on, it morphs into Mabate, and then it goes into Mabgate. So that's probably why we've got the name. And another more colourful explanation for the name is that there is a connection with a girl's name of Mabel. Are there any Mabels here? I don't know. But, and that comes from the Latin word amabilis, which means, in Latin, you all know, lovable. And so Mab is a shortened form of Mabel, which in medieval Leeds would, in common parlance by the lads of Leeds, would have meant a name for, or they used the name for a lady of the night as a slattern or a drab or a frowdy or a hobby horse or a strumpet or a mouldy pudding. That's in the news at the moment, isn't it? Somebody smelt of fish. Loose stocking, kixie wixie. So all these colourful words were used to describe the ladies of the night. And bringing us into the 21st century, Leeds City Council tried to do that in Holbeck recently by creating a zone for ladies of the night. They come in the day as well. I was once at 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning, I was once accosted.
You're not the only one.
Now I just want to talk about the beck, because without the beck runs north to south through Mabgate. As on my thing, it goes. This is the line of the river, and it roughly follows the line of Mabgate. It's to the west, immediately to the west of Mabgate itself, the street. It starts its journey from a spring close to the Otley Shevin. The spring's called Gill Beck, and it runs through Golden Acre Park, where it's dammed at its southern end, and then it morphs into Addlebeck, Meanwood Beck, Sheepscombe Beck, Mabgate Beck, changes its name as it goes along. It doesn't, but we do. And Ladybeck and Timblebeck before it ends up in the River Aire south of Crown Point Bridge, opposite the armories. So it has a fairly lengthy journey. But in the early days of the 19th century, the beck gave water power to energize machinery, usually with a water wheel. But it could only do so if there was sufficient rainfall. But the introduction of the steam engine towards the end of the 1700s could be relied on to perform, the river could be relied on to perform regardless of the weather conditions. So they could have access to water. Water also played an essential part in the manufacturing process, as well as being a great way of disposing of waste products associated with the industrial processes. And of course, that's very much in the news at the moment with what's going on in our rivers. Man sought to control the line of the direction of the rivers by using mostly stone blocks to embank the beck. And you can here see lessons in this. You can here see that's the stone sets all the way along both sides of the beck, and it's channeled. It's channeled. And the beck from Buslingthorpe Lane Bridge to the River Aire was and is embanked to this day, partly as flood control measure and partly to improve the flow of the water to the mills. I now want to try and paint a picture of what was going on in Mabgate in the pre-industrial period. I've drawn a purple line around one area of Mabgate. Mabgate, the street is in red. There's going, and Quarry Hill is here. And you see that some activity in this area with long, thin lines of what look like houses. The rest of it is, the same goes on there, which is on North Street, but not much is going on over here. So the area remained largely rural and undeveloped until the late 18th century, when serious industrialization began to take hold. That does not mean that nothing was going on there before then. And Maurice Beresford, for example, tells us that in 1690, there were just a few houses which were liable for the hearth tax in Mabgate. And then in 1725, there were 34 houses referred to. And many of these were in folds, and folds are these long, thin strips, which go like that. And the idea was that initially that somebody would have a strip of land in which they would live, and they would have in effect a long market garden behind their house, and then that was gradually filled up with houses as time went on. They were generally very higgledy-piggledy and not in 90-degree straight lines. They would often be slightly higgledy-piggledy. In 1774, someone was selling land adjacent to the beck, and in the advert it was ideal for the erection of a malt kiln. Another advert suggests that some land is available to lease, which was very proper for a dyer. So you get the drift that they're looking to try and industrialize the area, albeit slowly. So small-scale commercial activity was clearly in the air. In 1785, someone was selling a garth and a garden yard. So actually one of these strips down here. So they were basically setting the stage for the Industrial Revolution as it came into being. Interestingly, as in 1819, the overseers of the poor managed to attract the workhouse to open a vagrant office and common lodging house in Mabgate. Could do with one now, probably in the whole of Leeds. And local residents, interesting, were requested to desist from the relief of all travelling beggars and to refer any person of that description applying to them for relief to refer them to the superintendent who will investigate. Sounds like the government. And during this period, the town of Leeds and its surrounding areas would have seen some important economic and social changes driven by the growth of trade and the development of local industries. Indeed, Ralph Thoresby, in his Ducatus Leodiensis again, he tells us that Quarry Hill and Mabgate were both replenished with good, substantial clothiers. So this is around 1700. So it was perhaps a little bit more developed than I've led you to believe, but those were his words. And one of these Mabgate clothiers is a very interesting character because his name was Joseph Ryder. And he was born in 1695 and he died in 1768. And he was a dyer and cloth maker whose wealth impacted very significantly in the business and political life of Leeds. And a lot of it arose because he didn't have any children. But he and his wife would often spend their time at spas, having little mini holidays, presumably places like Harrogate and Scarborough, or I'm not sure where. Clearly, the Ryders were sufficiently important in their day to have a street named after them. I'll come on to that in a second. A street named after them, and Ryder Street to this day runs along the north side of the former St. Patrick's Catholic Church. And there it is. That's the York Road is parallel to this, but on the left-hand side of the church. And this is Ryder Street. Ryder here is spelled with an I, but it's clearly interchangeable in it. And I'll come to that in a moment. By the time Joseph Ryder died in 1768, he had moved house on 3 occasions, each time within Mabgate, and he built a house here, which is the very footprint of this building here. So you've got the York Road running alongside there, and his land, and Ryder Street is there, and that was St. Mary's Church, which we'll come on to later. Oops. So when he died, this is the interesting bit, when he died in 1768, his nephew, David Ryder, inherited everything. And the everything was the cloth business and a lot more. And the business was obviously a very successful one because in 1777, just a few years later, David Ryder's daughter, Olive, married William Lupton, which is a name still recognised by many in Leeds today. Such was the wealth of David Ryder that he announced in the Leeds Mercury that his daughter brought a dowry of £5,000 into the marriage. That's equivalent to about £1 million today. I thought it might have been more, but anyway, there we are. And a few years later, David Ryder created a trust for the benefit of the children of his daughter, who were Luptons. And the trust included much land between today's Merrion Centre and Vicar Lane. It's a huge tract of land. Interestingly, in the 20th century, an Olive Lupton married a solicitor in Leeds called Middleton. and I imagine this might ring a bell with some of you. And one of the descendants of this Middleton was Kate, the Princess of Wales. Sometime before her recent illness, Princess Kate bumped into me in Kirkgate Market, as you do. And not only that, but she made me late for a meeting at the Civic Trust. I'm not sure if you were there, Kevin.
No.
I was late for the meeting. She was sort of aware of the family's connection with Leeds. I gave her my card, but protocol forbids me from saying anything else. But seriously, it might not be a bad idea given that there is this connection with Leeds and this Princess Kate, and she knows that, it might not be a bad idea to get her involved in some way with what's going on at the Leeds Library. Just a thought.
Mm-hmm.
That's not in the text.
Yeah.
I want now to talk to you about two Mabgate industrialists who, in 1791 and 1812, 30 years apart, I suppose, 20 years apart, that marked the start of two giant players in the industrialisation of Mabgate. This is the green line there is just Mabgate, the street running down to Quarry Hill, and the red bit at the top right-hand corner is the location of Mabgate Mills. Mabgate Mills is still there today on that side, not necessarily in the same building, but it's on that side. So you will see what went on right back to 1791. And this typifies what was going on generally in the country, and particularly in Leeds, about the comings and goings and the ups and the downs of businesses in the early days of the Industrial Revolution. In 1791, Joseph Holroyd and his friend Samuel Blagborough bought a house in Mabgate there for £2,000. Quite a lot of money. The mill was intended to be used as a water-powered woolen cloth mill, with the water coming roughly from where Burton's factory was, this way and down that way and into the beck there. And the water wheel was on the gable wall, on that gable wall of the building. The beck produced the water, which turned the wheel, but just 4 years later, the water wheel was replaced by a 20 horsepower steam engine. So you see a change from water to steam is epitomised by what went on there. This allowed them to generate more horsepower, and it was a great improvement on the water wheel. By 1803, the business was not running profitably, and the owners decided to try and turn the woolen cloth mill into a cotton mill. And cotton was at that time thought to be much more profitable than wool. So we changed from wool to cotton. The machinery in the old wooden mill had to be tweaked, and Holroyd engaged the services of a guy called Thomas Lawson to advise on the necessary alterations to the machinery. I'm going to talk more about Thomas Lawson later on. Just 2 years later, that's in 1805, one of the partners, Samuel Blagborough, was bankrupted following a disaster in another unrelated business. Holroyd bought his share out, so he owned 100%. The following year, Holroyd decided to leave Leeds and go to Manchester and set up a cotton mill there. You can see it's frenetic activity, up, down, and around in a circle. Holroyd couldn't sell this mill or find anyone to take it on for ages, well, this is what the mill looks like today, that's the mill. This is Mabgate, the street. So this is the back of the mill in one way, and that is the the internal courtyard, which is behind the mill. Definitely worth a trip. And there's a very nice cafe there as well, which you can have exceedingly good food and coffee, reasonably priced. So yes, in 1833, he finally found somebody to buy it. He was a bleacher called Morfitt, and he came from Cookridge. And he turned the mill into a flax mill. So we've been into, that's our third iteration. In 1870, the mill changed again back to a woolen factory with 2 mills and an engine house and a 60 horsepower beam engine. So we've gone from 20 to 60, obviously more efficient. Later still, the buildings had many uses, including footwear trades and trades connected with the world of cloth making and tailoring. In the mid to late 20th century, Mabgate Mill was refurbished and turned into offices, cultural and creative activities, which is the current situation. So you can see it was, at the time, it was a very edgy place, was Mabgate, with changes going on at every turn, businesses opening and closing with gay abandon. And the second mill I want to now examine, well, before I do very quickly, this is an 1837 plan of Mabgate Mills. So we've got Mabgate the street there, we've got Mabgate the beck running along this roughly here. This is the mill. We've got an engine house there, a boiler, we've got warehouses, counting house, that's the accountant's office. We've got a stable there for the horse that will drag things around, and workshops there. So, and interestingly, the reason I put these arrows on there, those are supposed to be arrows, that shows that the water has been pumped in from the beck, pumped down here, up to the engine house, and then the wastewater goes down the other way. And the second, this guy's made lasting impression on Mabgate, Samuel Lawson, and his personal history was fairly typical of many industrialists at the time. His granddad was born in Keighley in 1728, where he worked all his life as a watch and clock maker. Now, that guy, the watchmaker, had a son called Thomas, we talked about earlier. He came to sort out somebody else's machinery. And he was born in 1754, and he learned a lot from his clockmaking dad because he became a very competent engineer, and he was much in demand, moving randomly from where the mills were changing from wool to cotton to flax. It was good news for his business. Each time there was a change, machinery needed tweaking. In 1790, I don't know if any of you have been on the road to Ilkley from Otley, that you'll pass Burley and Wharfdale, and there's a bypass of Burley and Wharfdale dual carriageway, and on the right, between the carriageway and the river, there's an old mill called Greenholme Mill, which has just been converted into lots of flats and houses. Well, he got a job there for some time, tweaking their machinery. Thomas Lawson's reputation had spread to Leeds, and in 1803, Thomas was headhunted by Holroyd to sort his mill out as well. You've mentioned that before. At this time, Thomas's son Samuel, who's this guy here, was 19 years of age, and he was serving his apprenticeship at the famous Holbeck Round Foundry of Fenton, Murray and Woods in Holbeck. And at the time he was there, they were working on the famous Salamanca engine locomotive. The chances of him having worked on it are remote, but he may have done. But the point was, all this invention and novelty was floating around. And having and it's almost certain that his father would have said, well, why don't you try and set up on your own in Mabgate? And that's exactly what he did in 1812. So Samuel went and started his in a small way as a blacksmith in Mabgate in 1812. And this is, we don't know exactly where he started, but this here, we've got up the middle there, we've got Mabgate, the street, and we've got the beck here in blue, which is a bit wobbly like my hand. It goes through parallel, almost parallel. This here is Mabgate Mills, and this little gap here is Hope House, which was which is still in existence. It wasn't then, but it is now. That was there, and his foundry started off in a small way here, and it basically over the years it covered virtually the whole street, both sides, absolutely vast. So Hope Foundry saw the birth of an invention which was to revolutionize textile machinery throughout the world, something called the screw gill. It was a device to improve the preparation of fibers, whether it's flax, cotton, or whatever, and it saved a lot of time and money and made firms very profitable on the back of that. He had a patent for that. Samuel died in 1866, and his sons and later his grandsons carried on the business. This is a much later advertising material produced by Samuel Lawson. It just shows you what the sort of work that they did, working in flax, machinery for flax, for tow, which is sort of much stronger. It's the sort of stuff you use for sacking and making sails for ships. Sailing ships were prevalent at the time, and then the reason I really put this up is to show that there was an international connection, very international. They exported all over the world, and they exhibited at exhibitions all over the world, and so it was a major operation. As the 19th century progressed, the flax trade, which was so important to Leeds, gradually dwindled to the extent that the famous Marshall Mills, Temple Mills in Holbeck, which were, I think Marshall was one of the wealthiest, if not the wealthiest man in the UK at the time. It was a hugely successful business. Eventually, it collapsed by 1888. Marshall Mills closed in the form they had been. And I'm going to leave flax for the moment. I was going to tell you more about it, but time is catching me up as usual. And that is, I showed you a gap at the bottom of the map with pink on it. Well, here, this is the office that was built on that land. So, yeah, all this instability in the flax world, which having business almost overnight collapsed. It was a gradual, but in 1888 it just collapsed altogether. As a result, there was a shrinking market not only for flax but for flax machinery and all the machinery that goes with it. So Lawsons were in some difficulties, as was a firm in the centre of Leeds called Fairbairn, but run by a guy called Peter Fairbairn, who was famous for having been the Lord Mayor at the time Queen Victoria came to open the town hall. So, the business was, everyone was suffering. So the two companies decided to merge, and a firm called Fairbairn Lawson Coombe and Barber was formed. but are both operating from their independent locations. And that was in 1900. And the 11 years later, this building was built, Hope House was built as the combined HQ offices for both companies. So everything was based here from the operational side. I just want to just stop here at the moment and say this is Hope Foundry and Hope this and Hope that. I want to just digress. As I'm frequently asked, what on earth has Hope got to do with Mabgate? Was Mabgate so awful that the area could only hope for better things? Or was this area simply hopeless? To find the explanation, which is my one claim to fame in Leeds history, I think, is this map of 1815, the Leeds map of 1815. And you'll see here, this here is North Street, and this here is the hedgerow. And if you look here, you'll see there's Back Nile Street, Trafalgar Street, Hope Street, and then various other streets. And then we've got Nelson Street. Does that ring any bells with anyone? Napoleonic Wars. And Nelson got all the credit, but Hope was there or thereabouts. And who was Hope? That was Hope. Quite a smart guy. Rear Admiral Sir John Johnston Hope. And I'm pretty sure that it's too much of a coincidence for it not to be the case. Nelson Street has now been morphed into Eastgate because it's wider now, but Nelson Street, you can see the upper hedgerow and it stops at Vicar Lane. Lady Lane is still there, and Nelson Street is exactly where Eastgate is, but it's been widened. So this, I mentioned before that Fairbairn Lawson had dealings with the whole world really in terms of exporting, and I don't know if there's any other lawyers in the room, but if you do meet a lawyer, you can throw into the conversation. Have you heard of the case of I'll just very quickly show you this going back. This is what Hope Street looked like. Narrow. That was it. As late as 1908, that's what it looked like. Pretty grimy, going down the hill towards Regent Street. This is what it looked like when everything had been pulled down. That church is in Mabgate, and that's what it looks like roughly today. Of course, it's been changed significantly but you can see the church there, and it's a wide road. So next time you go down New York, and it's called New York Road. So next time you go down that, you say, I think we should perhaps even think about starting a campaign to have the street name changed. But anyway, that's an artist's impression of what the whole place looked like in 1920. It's not totally accurate, but it's there or thereabouts. You get the feel. This is the case I want you to memorize and throw into your next conversation, because when I was a law student, when we were all law students, you learn in contract law. Contract is a very important part of basic law, and you have a contract to buy or sell a house, and unless you sign it, and it's a done deal. Fibrosa in 1939, just before the war anyway, they signed a contract with with Lawson to make some machinery. They paid a deposit of £1,000. You probably know that on the 3rd of September 1939, the Germans marched into Poland, and then that became an enemy alien country. So as a result, it was illegal for Fairbairn to comply with the contract because they couldn't send it to Poland. So they did nothing. So Fibrosis said, "Can we have our money back, please?" And this case went all the way through to the House of Lords in 1943. You'd have thought they had better things to do with their time. And because there's a doctrine of frustration of contracts. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but the point is the Court of Appeal found in favour of Lawson, and the House of Lords overruled it, so they got their money back. And I no doubt Fairbairn Lawson was left with a whacking bill to pay for the lawyers' fees from the time, any involvement. I just want to have a brief look at St Mary's Church in Mabgate. You've seen it in the distance in those earlier pictures. And the reason I've put it in is twofold. First of all, it was built in the late 1820s, 1826 to 8, following the Napoleonic Wars. As a result of the 18th century agricultural and industrial revolutions, lots of huge populations had come into Leeds without necessarily having anywhere to go to church. Basically C of E, places like St Peter's and what I call the parish church, Eastminster. There were just a few of these churches around, but they were fairly snooty, and people would have the wealthy people would have pews, and they would they weren't very keen to have these smelly people that come from the country. So the government was very worried about the possibility of there being revolution in the air, because these people are all coming and there's not enough facilities for them and there's no one to control them, and so on and so forth. So they hit on this idea of creating a whole load more churches. We had the government in 1818 introduced the Church Building Act. Officially, it was to celebrate the victory over Napoleon, but in reality, the government wanted to address the concerns which I've just mentioned. And the churches were, under this act, were commonly known as commissioners or Million Act churches. In Leeds, we had, after this 1818 Act, we had two churches built. One was St Mark's near the university, and the other was Meadow Lane, Christ Church, Meadow Lane. St Mark's still exists, the other one doesn't. But 623 churches were built under this act, so you couldn't possibly do that just for £1 million. But it was a sort of buy one get one free sort of thing. You would get matched funding by the government, and so with Mabgate was left out of that equation. But in 1824, a second act was passed where they gave £500,000. And St Mary's was built under that scheme, and shortly after this is a picture of that building there. That building there is where the church was. Church was there till the late 70s, pulled down, and this was the graveyard for that church. This is Quarry House, so you know where you are in relation. And you probably know that in the 1830s onwards, there was quite a number of cholera outbreaks in Leeds. the locals, or some of the locals to this day, still call that graveyard the cholera graveyard. And if you look carefully, that's my foot there at the bottom. If you look carefully, you can and wander around, you can actually find and see who died where and when. You see, this was 1832, some 12th of August, 1832, 1832. I'm sorry. I'm now going to quickly look at the city of Mabgate Inn. Has anyone actually been to it? Did anyone go to it? No.
Yes.
Yes.
Just say you've got 10 minutes, Robert. So I'm very anxious that you talk about Mabgate today, because that's one of your areas of expertise.
Okay. Well, we'll just leave that on one side for the moment, but just to tell you that that green, it was built in 1856, but in 1881 they put on this this Vermontoft tiles, and they're still there to this day, and they are magnificent, and they've withstood weather, vandals, and all sorts of things. It's now flats, but anyway, it's worth looking at. Right, I've been told off here, so I will move on to right. In August 2021, Leeds City Council suddenly woke up to the fact that Mabgate is depressed and depressing and not going anywhere. And they produced something called a Mabgate Regeneration Framework. And it was an attempt to reshape the area by improving the highways and welcoming Mabgate into the rest of Leeds. Boris Johnson might have called this an attempt to level up, creating public spaces and support for art and culture. And it's sort of happening, but it hasn't fully happened. In April 2022, thanks to a lot of pressure from the Civic Trust and a few other people, Leeds Mabgate became a designated conservation area. So that at least in theory, new developments should fit in with what was left of the old Mabgate. In the last few years, 2 large blocks of 5-storey flats have been erected at the southern end of Mabgate, including a shisha bar, where you can imagine that you are living in a far-off land smoking a hookah. It's certainly interesting to see another culture. And if you like football, there's about 10 screens showing different football matches in different parts of the world. But it's an interesting phenomenon. You'll need to wash your clothes when you leave. But the east side of Mabgate, the street, because I'm out now with my picture numbers. What number are we on picture-wise, Alan? I'll just break off and show you this little story attached to this. This is the gable end wall of a 93 Mabgate. It's towards the Skinner Lane end, almost opposite Mabgate Mills. In 1987, the owner of that building was a paint merchant, and a lady came in to buy some paint, and as she was walking out, the owner of the shop said, "Well, is there any chance you could paint this for us? Do something with it." It was just a blank wall which looked pretty naff. So she basically, she was a community artist from New Zealand, and she said basically, "No, I won't, but I will do it as a community activity." And she was basically put in touch with the art teacher at the local high school, Primrose High School on Dolly Lane, and they came forward with 6 kids who are shown here, 6 of the pupils, from the school, and they did a bit of research about what they were going to put on the wall, and that summer, for the summer holiday, they produced this in 1987. This doesn't look quite as brightly coloured today because it's faded, but it's still there. And it says 1987 at the top there, and the theme is Mabgate through time. And the kids came up with ideas of what they thought Mabgate looked like. And this was a picture of some people, posh people, but gambling in a where people playing cards and gambling in some place in Leeds. And this was somebody's kitchen, and this here is everything means something. These were the bibs that they wore when they were doing the painting. 1987, sorry, that was 1987. I tried to get this redone about 3 or 4 years ago, and we managed to get all the original team together, bar 2 of these kids. But the community artists from New Zealand came, and basically we agreed that we were going to redo it in the summer. And then what happened? COVID, and that rather spoiled things. So I'll talk to the pictures. I think it's easier. This is a gable. There's Hope. The gate to Hope Foundry there, and opposite it was a pub called the Black Horse. And this is the gable wall of the Black Horse. Same problem as we had earlier on. And East Street Arts, which is another arts organisation based in Mabgate, close to where the St Mary's Church used to be, and they got hold of a Portuguese artist who came up with this idea, and it was basically to pay homage to the work and the history of Burbantops pottery, which is only about a quarter of a mile away. And everything means something, and I haven't got time all of the inclination to go into everything, but it's quite clever the way he this is a downpipe, which is sort of incorporated that within the artwork quite nicely. And interestingly, it's not been vandalized. And these are just things you'll find dotted around. They come and they go, but especially that one there is quite remarkable. Behind that has been pulled down because that is on the opposite side. It's on the east side of Mabgate, just shy of Mabgate Mills, which is here. And the whole of this land is being converted, has been bought by Leeds City College, and they are building a block of flats and a teaching block and a sports block. And it's a hugely significant development on that side of the street. It will change the dynamic of the street altogether. So that's what's going on there. These other things are just by the by. That's the York Road flyover, and this is some artwork. This is on the gate of Hope Foundry. Again, typical of Mabgate. There's a New York Banksy called San One. You don't call yourself Robert Dyson. You call yourself. You have to think of an appropriate name. He was Sen One, and in 2018 he came from New York, and he spent a couple of days in Mabgate, and he painted this. It's desperately needing a bit of love and attention now. It says there, together we have, and then these objects here say hope, and again that hasn't been vandalised. It's very interesting that thing happens. This is a map showing in green the Mabgate, the street, and there is Mabgate Mills, and that's where over there is where the first mural I showed you was, and this here is Mabgate, Hope House, all the land here is being developed in the very near future for 3 very tall blocks of flats, with park, and as part of the deal, they're going to put a bridge over the beck and make a footpath through, so you don't have to go all the way down to go into town. So that's this is actually ongoing. The Leeds City College work is actually ongoing, and this is, they have permission, so it will happen in the next year or two. So do you want me to stop there?
Have you got some more slides? Just flick through them, Robert.
Hope House, which is where I spend a lot of my time. It's basically it's a charity which has been set up to provide education for kids who are struggling for whatever reason in state high schools, and they reach out to the children. Instead of teaching them maths, physics, chemistry, and so forth, they teach them art and music, and use those subjects to inculcate them with a bit of maths and a bit of whatever, and with a great deal of success. Small classes, a lot of individual attention and care, and their business model is that they let part of their buildings, most of their buildings, they let to tenants who pay a rent. That's their business model. They have the model business model for this place, and so they couldn't do anything because they didn't own the building. So the seller, the guy was prepared to sell it. He served a notice on them saying, "We must go because you've got a tenancy, you've got to go." They've been there 15 years, and eventually they managed to twist his arm and they managed to buy it. They managed to get a significant grant from Leeds City Council, one of the last EU grants ever given. So that almost helped. They got a benefit, somebody prepared to give them a low interest loan, and they bought the building, and they've now refurbished it. And you can now see the refurbished here, after the refurbishment. You can see the beams there, and this is here's a wooden block floor, which was part of the industrial process. Below the timber, there was coal dust. It was used in those days for to diffuse the noise and the heavy machinery. And stopping now. And that's one of the ceilings. You can see the vaulted brick ceilings. Absolutely magnificent, and it's all been redone. It was done on budget and on time. It's quite remarkable in today's world. And that's the ground floor entrance to the 1911 building. On that note.
Thank you. Well, I think we can see Robert could talk for at least 3 hours on this, so we've done extremely well to get him down to about 55 minutes. But I mean, you've been doing a tremendous amount of work with the institution you've just described, and I know that one of the tensions at the moment in Mabgate is that I remember walking down Mabgate in the early 1970s, and you went up that street and you thought you were in Victorian Leeds. It was totally unchanged, and there were the two pubs, the Black Horse and one other.
City
of Mabgate, that's right. And of course, now with the modern development that's come in, particularly the City College buildings, I read in the paper, I think, that there was tension because the music and art going on in your building is quite noisy. And then there are these people coming into their maybe slightly swanky flats who might think we can't have this riffraff making all this noise, and yet it's the social purpose of what you're doing with colleagues, which is so tremendously good. Any quick questions? It's a bit chilly in here, I know, isn't it? So I'm feeling a bit cold. But any quick questions? Or the point is, you must go down Mabgate and have a look. It is fascinating what's happening there.
Which is interesting.
Say that's, I think, the easiest way of getting over, and that we'll see, more of the changes in Leeds, is to go from the playhouse.
Yes.
To the new development that's, the pathways through, and then to the pedestrian bridge that goes over York Road, and that leads you. That's then there is the graveyard with this, and you walk along the stones and just keep going straight down. There's a little primary school on your right, and then keep on that route and down to Mabgate, and that really kind of places it in where it is in the city. And then when you walk down Mabgate, come back past that new painting on the York Road underpass, and you can see them, because then you're almost back at the playhouse. And you really get to the,
Would you like to lead the walk?
Yes. But that's something we ought to do. It'd be great if we had a Thoresby Society. Well, we have excursions coming up and next year, and it'd be great to do a tour of Mabgate and maybe go inside, particularly the building that you've just shown us. But I think we'll wind up there. But Robert, that was tremendously interesting, and I think there's a Thoresby Society Publications miscellany article in there certainly, and you can show us more of your extensive knowledge of this area, which is very difficult to get to know initially, because there's hardly anything written about it.
That's one of the strangest things. Why?
Well, we will see. Anyway, thank you very much, Robert. That was fantastic.